Michael, let us begin. And as people come in, all of us co-hosts can let them in and continue. So I think I know most of you. I'm Sandra Barron, and I'm coordinating Pax Christi Florida right now. I had a little bit of introduction about what Pax Christi is. Many of you, probably most of you know, but we are the regional branch of the International Catholic Peace Movement, which began after World War II in France to reconcile the Germans and the French, started by a bishop there, and it grew into 150 countries, came to the United States in 1972, to Florida through John Frank and his wife in 1982. Pax Christi, I think all of us know, maybe not, Latin for the peace of Christ. And we're grounded in the nonviolence that was witnessed by the life of Jesus Christ. And so that is our strong grounding. That's what we flow from. Everything that we do flows from that. And sort of somewhat the way Mahatma Gandhi used the power of nonviolence in India, and that Martin Luther King used the power of nonviolence during the civil rights movement. And Pax Christi has gotten involved because of nonviolence and such things as the civil rights movement and nuclear disarmament. And at this point for this meeting, also our creation. So we welcome you, and we hope that together we can find ways to move forward our care of our planet, to make it a positive movement individually and collectively in community. I'll quickly go through the agenda so you know what to expect. We'll start with an opening prayer, and then we're going to move on to checking in with everyone just to see where you're from and why you showed up here tonight. We're going to have a review of the Pope's message to COP28 and an overview of the results of COP28. We're going to then break into groups of 3 to discuss what we've heard, and then come back to the main group to see what kind of ideas, what percolated in our group tonight. And also, one other thing is that John Frank will have a bit of a presentation about what Pax Christi Florida has been doing legislatively this year. And all of that, we will have a closing prayer, and hopefully we will be doing all of this in about less than 90 minutes. So what I'd like to do now is have our opening prayer, which is going to be led by Marianne Holtz. Marianne's one of our former Pax Christi Florida coordinators, a faithful and active environmental advocate for many years. She was talking to me about this way back in the early 90s, and probably before that she had been awakened. Marianne's been a mental health counselor for many years, now retired, and a contemplative. Marianne.
Thanks, Sandy. So, to help us keep our hearts open to the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor, I'd like to lead us in some heart-focused breath prayer. And so I invite you to place a hand on your heart center. It's a way of focusing on that center that many of us sense as the place where the Spirit dwells within us and connects us with each other and with all of creation. And so become aware of your breath. Maybe invite your breath to slow a little, deepen a little. Find an easy rhythm. Maybe try out breathing in on a count of 5, breathing out on a count of 5. Continuing to breathe in that slow, easy rhythm, as though it is our heart that is breathing. So the breath comes in through the heart, and the breath moves through the heart back out. And on our next in-breath, breathe in love. Which is really the name of the divine. And breathe out love. Continue to breathe in love. Breathe out love. And expand our awareness now to the reality of the divine heart, the sacred heart, the infinite heart of compassion that holds our hearts, that holds the heart of all that is. And breathe in the life and the love that the divine is breathing into us each time we take an in-breath. And the divine breathes out to the world through us every time we exhale love, compassion. Experiencing being held by this infinite heart of compassion can help us keep our hearts open, can help us to breathe now love and compassion to each other, to all the earth creatures who are suffering, to all the suffering humans and more than human creatures. And as we continue breathing this way, we ask, oh God, that you open our minds and keep our hearts open during our time together this evening, that we might be vessels for your flow of love and for your wisdom of how it is that we are being called to respond to the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor. And so we take another few breaths through our heart, this time gratitude. Breathing in gratitude that we are able to be here, that we have received the call to respond, and breathing out that gratitude. Amen.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Marianne. Now we're going to do a brief check-in. I'll start, and then Marianne will take us around. We'll say our name, where we are, and what might have attracted us to this webinar. I'm Joe Einone. I'm here in Hollywood, Florida, and I'm here to learn what next steps can advance environmental justice. Marianne?
I'm Marianne Holtz. I'm in St. Petersburg, and I'm here because I'm answering a call that I sense from God to help people grow in resilience as we face the climate crisis. John Frank. Unmute, please, John.
I'm in St. John's, Florida, outside Jacksonville. I'm on the Pax Christi Florida leadership team and have been active with particularly the engagement in Tallahassee during the current legislature. And I'm here because I've been so motivated by Joe, who has a real vision to move forward on the vision of Francis.
And Sandy.
Sandra Barron, and I'm here for my grandchildren and for future generations, and feel that I need to join with others of like mind and pray and hope that this well will move our earth to a healthier state than it is right now, and all the people and beings on it.
And Michael.
Michael, Miami, Florida. I'm part of Pax Christi Florida, part of its leadership as well. I am here because creation is in crisis, and I am in particular drawn by the Holy Father's integral ecological vision for how we get through this.
Art.
Hi, I'm Art Kane from Plantation, Florida, member of Pax Christi leadership team as well. Also with spirituality and sustainability global network, where we're looking to spread and teach as far as we can and network with others using the lessons of eco-spirituality, connection to nature.
Anne.
Did you say my name? I'm Ann Richter. I'm from Clearwater, Florida. And I feel right now we're being so overwhelmed with so many other issues, like the Palestinian issue, that I feel neglecting the environmental issue, which I know is crucial to what's happening and what's going on. So I'm grateful to be able to be here and catch up a little bit. How about Tony?
Yes, I'm Tony Magdaliano. I'm based in Key West. I have been here almost a year. I'm the outreach coordinator for Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Miami. I've been writing a syndicated column on social justice and peace for 22 years. And a particular note, I imagine to all of you, 43 years ago, I was honorably discharged as a conscientious objector from the U.S. Army. And I'm here because I just want to grow in all of this.
Welcome, Tony. It's nice to meet you. We've been exchanging emails with you, so good to meet you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And Nancy.
There. Hi, I'm Nancy O'Byrne, and I'm on the Pax Christi Florida Council, former coordinator. I'm here in St. Augustine, Florida, and I am just hoping that more Catholics will get on the train that Pope Francis is trying to get us on. So many others are on that train already and doing what they need to be doing, and we need to catch up. So I'm hoping this will help.
James.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jim McClellan from Los Angeles, and I was introduced by Joe and Art, and it's part of a continuity of SSGN's the Spirituality and Sustainability Network's participation in the Season of Creation initiative. And of course, Laudato Si is one of the four pillars that inspire us. Thank you.
Brian.
I'm Brian Fraley. I live in West Palm Beach. I am a professor at Palm Beach Atlantic University. Starting next week, I teach a course on integral human development at the master's level. Since I suppose back in the 80s, when I was part of the parish where Tom Gumbleton was pastor. I've just been deeply involved in and committed to Pax Christi, and what does the peace of Christ mean if not a commitment to nonviolence to each other as human beings, but also a nonviolence to God's good creation, and how it is that we can live in the way promised by the gospel simply by opening up our eyes to those possibilities and living into them.
And Isaac.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I think I turned everything on. Hi, I'm Isaac Chandler. I sit on the board for Pax Christi Florida. I was drawn to be here tonight because I want to be more aware of things going on. Living in the state of Florida, I'm from the North Florida area, little town called Jasper. I work in Live Oak, Florida. I know that Florida will be ground zero for a lot of the impacts going on with climate change. And I feel like we need to be at the forefront in talking about a number of these changes, sea level rise, what it's doing to our natural resources and so forth, our coral reefs, our fish, everything. As a person of color, I know that communities of color are already starting to feel some of the effects of climate change, especially when it comes to excessive heat, areas where there is not a lot of greenery. It's very, very urban, very, very dark roads, asphalt, so forth, areas that attract heat and so forth. I know it's these communities that are going to be impacted the greatest. And so I think I have a responsibility to be aware of all these things and to find out how I can help it, how we can preserve this beautiful creation that God has created for us. In our solar system, we're the only planet that supports any sort of life. We probably share this Earth with some 10 million other species, many of which we've only calculated about 2 million. There's still some 8 million that are out there waiting to be discovered. Hopefully we discover them before they go away and are lost to us forever. So very happy to be here.
Anne McFadden.
Oh, good evening, everyone. It's my delight to be here this evening. And my reason is that we cannot stop following the nonviolent Jesus, no matter where we are and what our roles are in life. Involved in Pax Christi in Pittsburgh and then here in Florida. And I believe the nonviolent movement is the only way to go. Amen.
Amen.
Karen and Dan. Karen, can you unmute? Say who you are, where you are, and why you're here tonight. Oh, maybe she's not able to do that. So Dave, we'll move to you.
So I'm Dave Fletcher from Hollywood, but currently I'm somewhere north of Baltimore this evening. And I am here because we are facing our last opportunity to save the Earth. I'm here because in 6 weeks we will have our first grandchild, and I want to leave an Earth for our grandchild the same or better that I've enjoyed. I'm an outdoor person. I'm an environmentalist. I know that many of the people that are most suffering from climate change and so forth are those at the lower end of our economic scale. And those of us who have capabilities need to step up to help what we can do.
Karen, it looked like you were able to unmute. You want to try again? No? How about Kath? Kath, would you be willing to unmute and say who you are?
Sorry, I'm trying.
Yeah, great.
Catherine Oliver. John Frank invited me to, or sent me the link, because he has heard that I'm very interested in the environment. I'm very passionate about pollinators, bees, and butterflies and wasps and their effect on our food supply. And as climate change affects the plants, it's going to affect our pollinators and our food supply. So praying for those creatures is part of my daily prayer life. And I pray for the scientists who are finding ways that we can hopefully mitigate some of those effects.
Thank you all. Michael, Sandra, is there a way that you could send the invitation out in an email again to folks? Because, I mean, the Zoom link, because it seems like half the folks who registered aren't here, and I'm betting they're having trouble getting in.
I know, is there any way to send just the direct link instead of that registration?
Yeah, just the Zoom link itself.
Yeah, the
Well,
same link
what
that,
I had, sorry about that, John, go ahead.
yeah, the same link that I used to get in, because that was my problem. The one that you sent, Michael, is the direct access link.
That's a different, that's because you're a host.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. What everyone should have received today was a confirmation, which is just a copy of the confirmation they got when they first registered. If people are having to register again with that,
I
then now,
didn't have to, that's
now I'm
why.
mystified. Yeah, so I can resend the confirmation again.
Yeah, just resend the confirmation on the chance that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we only have 50% of the people that registered, 16 of 32.
Yeah. I apologize if some of you here get it, but I'm just going to.
And Michael, how about while you're doing that, we could move it slowly into, we were going to just, myself was going to do some stream of consciousness, pulling out of quotes from Francis's letter to COP28. And then Michael, after that, is going to weave with a PowerPoint presentation, weave some of the Pope's thoughts and hopes into the results that occurred at COP28. So just for those of you, and many of you might have already read the Pope's letter, but I was just pulling out what spoke to me. So if you allow me, while Michael is resending the link, I'm going to read this. The Pope wasn't able to be there because of health issues, but he sent an emissary who read this letter. So this is just pieces of it. Time is short. The future of us all depends on the present that we now choose. I am with you because the destruction of the environment is an offense against God, a sin that is not only personal but also structural, one that greatly endangers all human beings, especially the most vulnerable in our midst, and threatens to unleash a conflict between generations. Are we working for a culture of life or a culture of death? Let us choose life. Let us choose the future. The drive to produce and possess has become an obsession, resulting in an inordinate greed that has made the environment the object of unbridled exploitation. The climate, run amok, is crying out to us to halt this illusion of omnipotence. What stands in the way of this? The divisions that presently exist among us. What is the way out of this? It is the one that you are pursuing in these days, the way of togetherness, multilateralism. In this regard, it is disturbing that global warming has been accompanied by a general cooling of multilateralism, a growing lack of trust within the international community, and a loss of the shared awareness of being a family of nations. It is up to this generation to heed the cry of peoples, the young and children, and to lay the foundations of a new multilateralism. Why not begin precisely from our common home? Let us leave behind our divisions and unite forces. Those were just some of the things that I pulled out from that. And then Michael, I don't know if you're okay now with taking over this, if you've resent the link. And
Sure. Yeah, once again, confirmations resent. Maybe this go around will help people trickle in. I'm going to share my screen and so I'm going to get myself situated here. fellow hosts, if people are in the waiting room, just while I'm presenting, help me out with that. So I'm going to run through some of the key highlights of COP28 in light of the Pope's message, but mostly about some of the main things that happened at the assembly. It's going to be, and forgive me for this, it's going to be rather simplistic, as everyone here I'm sure is very well aware. This is a huge event full of all kinds of complications and different nations talking to each other, diplomatic matters, matters of policy, internationally and both domestically with respect to each nation. Hundreds of lobbyists, good and bad. I'll use air quotes on that. So what I'm going to be presenting here are basically some of the what the consensus has shown in light of what Pope Francis shared. Could be have been some really good moves forward to help sort of situate and contextualize tonight's conversation. So Pope Francis, he said that day that the future of us all depends on the present that we now choose. He couldn't be there in person, but this was a video message that was heard around the world. And so one of the key things that came out of this, and I think was greatly influenced by his efforts leading up to it, was the first ever faith pavilion. It was set up mostly by the Muslim Council of Elders, the COP28 presidency, UNEP, and a group including the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development and more than 50 other faith organizations. The pavilion had over 65 sessions with religious leaders, indigenous peoples, scientists, politicians, and showed the importance of working together across different faiths to solve the climate crisis. The sessions focused on finding complete solutions to protect the earth and environment, and it was a big step in bringing faith-based views into global environmental policies and actions. I think this is really significant in light of Laudato Si, especially, which one of its many large claims is that the loss of a spiritual and sacramental vision of creation and instead of replacement of a technocratic kind of paradigm of approaching the earth as material needs a corrective fast, and the corrective is one that faith-based people in particular are specially equipped to address. In his address, he also emphasized that environmental destruction goes beyond personal wrongdoing or sin, and that it's a structural issue, and that it poses a significant threat to humanity, especially to the poor. And which brings us to the Loss and Damage Fund, which COP28 introduced. The fund represents a concrete effort to aid the most vulnerable nations affected by climate change. However, the fund, while it's a positive and significant step, it did reveal a number of some significant gaps, especially between the developing world and wealthy nations. So the huge difference is there's an estimated need of $7 trillion annually for it to have the kind of effects that they're hoping for. But the actual contributions have been pretty slim so far. The US, for instance, has only so far contributed 17.5 million. So we have pretty far to go in terms of that fund, which, if it does get support, could have really, really major impacts on reversing a lot of the sort of damages, particularly with policy and fossil fuels and stuff like that we're all aware of now. But there was conversation there about this need for equity, which is a pretty big deal, especially given the host nation and the people who contribute to COP28 the most. Pope Francis, in addressing climate change, also emphasized the need for a united approach that includes both reducing emissions or mitigation and adjusting to climate impacts or adaptation. Mitigation in particular involves using renewable energy and improving energy efficiency to address the root causes of climate change. And adaptation means making changes in our daily lives and systems to better handle the climate change effects, like strengthening infrastructure and modifying farming practices. I feel like the Pope's last document was especially careful and specific about the need for collective sort of international solutions, and also that those changes can only happen via the individual heart and individual changes that we make. And I think that that's sort of, it sort of shows a sort of a, I guess, a subsidiary in approach, where if we do focus on, if each nation focuses on, say, infrastructure and farming practices, that will inevitably lead to the need to agree on more sort of international solutions. He underlines that tackling climate change requires a collective effort, combining emission reduction with strategies to adapt to changes and ensuring the safety and well-being of all people and the planet. Pope Francis says that we have to choose the future, and that we have to be attentive to the cry of the earth. And so how do we do that in a way that seems fair? And that brings us to the global stocktake. That was a key part of the Paris Agreement. And for those of you who don't know, it's a thorough review done every 5 years to check how the world is doing in reducing climate change and meeting greenhouse gas emission targets. At COP28, there was a call for reflection, a push for further action on this front, with the goal being to cut emissions by 55% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. The global stocktake underlines the importance of being open, working together internationally, and having a united approach once again. It stresses our collective duty to fight climate change and address issues like poverty and inequality. And of course, this was probably the thing that happened at COP28 that got the most headlines, I think, at least as far as the news that circulates around me, that there was a discussion about fossil fuels that was a bit of a turning point in how we talk about fossil fuels at COP28. For the first time at a UN climate conference, nations agreed to start moving away from fossil fuels, and which is a major step towards sustainable energy and is seen as a collective victory. What it didn't do was reach a decision to completely phase out fossil fuels. This sort of created a kind of a semantic debate, if you will, between what it means to phase out and cut. And that was definitely a lobbied effort. There was some momentum, I think, at the start of the event for stronger language of cutting phasing out. But there was a presence of a lot of fossil fuel companies and lobbyists that sort of made that a bit harder to do. The agreement to COP28 achieved, despite the complexity of international negotiations, reflects the Pope's call for a fair and equitable end to the fossil fuel era. It highlights the urgent need to phase out fossil fuels for the future of our planet and the well-being of vulnerable communities. And once again, there's a huge theme here. This is about embracing unity, which this is very much in keeping with the Pope's sort of social magisterium. You know, whether it's Fratelli Tutti or Laudato Si, he has time and time again has been imploring us to work together as international bodies. Pope Francis is urging to leave behind our divisions and unite our forces resonates strongly, especially following COP28. It serves as a powerful reminder of our shared responsibility to tackle climate change. He advocates for a new form of multilateralism based on trust and effective cooperation, which is essential to facing a global issue such as the climate. The commitments to move away from fossil fuels and support vulnerable communities underscore the importance of unified action and creating sustainability across the world in a way that's fair and equitable, with an emphasis on who needs to do more than others. You know, so this is the year 2024. And which coincides with the 800th anniversary of St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of the Sun. And in his talk, Pope Francis calls this year a crucial moment to, quote, emerge from the dark night of wars and environmental devastation into the dawn of a new and radiant day. As people of faith, peacemakers, and engaged citizens of Florida, I'm hoping that after tonight we can be inspired by tonight and by the significant anniversary to start brainstorming and implementing innovative ideas to uphold our moral and ethical duties to the earth and to each other, and doing so in the spirit of St. Francis and step closer to realizing the Holy Father's vision for a more sustainable legacy for our planet. So again, that's a really simplistic version of everything that happened in light of the Pope's contribution to COP28. But I hope it gives us a little bit more grounding as to what he calls for and what we got out of the Assembly this year, hoping for big changes in the future. Thank you.
Okay, now John is just going to take some time to show how this transfers into action with Florida legislature, and then we're going to go into breakout groups to see, you know, what ideas we could rise up and then carry forward. John?
Thank you, Joe. Right, I'm just going to, in 5 minutes or so, paint for you, if you will, an interpretation of our foray into advocacy with the legislature over the last 6 months and how it can connect to forthcoming action initiatives that I think Joe will explain later on in the final segment of this evening's program. To some extent, we've laid an interesting groundwork, and I just kind of thought through this earlier this afternoon. And probably the easiest way to kind of focus on some of this is to share with you some spots here on our website, and then I'm going to make some commentary here. Pax Christi Florida initiated what it called the PC Flack 24 campaign, seeking common ground for the common good. The initial effort was to first reach out to our bishops, and you'll see that in our letter to the bishops, we specifically focused on 3 issues. And that third issue, I mean, we actually address about 9 issues in the campaign, but this is where we first coined the phrase creation in crisis. I don't know if that was Mike's idea or Patrick's, somebody on that committee, but creation in crisis has become the catchphrase for our collective concern about responding to Pope Francis's call to recognize the intrinsic value of the environment. So this letter went to our 7 bishops. We subsequently had dialogues with 4 of our bishops. One bishop in particular, our own bishop in the Diocese of St. Augustine, and I know Nancy's on this call, has wonderfully decided to follow up with us and wanted to talk about each of the issues. And so about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we spent 90 minutes with the bishop of the Diocese of St. Augustine talking about creation and crisis. So the whole rationale of dealing with the bishops was to somehow put some I mean, that was one side before we reached out to the legislature. But the bishops, of course, are collectively called the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops. And where did we put that? There is an interesting overlay of their agenda. Here's the Florida bishops' priorities. And the environment gets like one sentence. The red, this is the Florida Conference of Catholic Bishops. The red is overlapping with the Pax Christi Florida 9 issues, or not all of them, but here it is right here on that second to the last bullet under the category called Family and Social Concerns. It simply says promoting policies that enhance the stewardship and care of Florida's natural environment. Unfortunately, the Catholic bishops did nothing with that. Many of us who participated in the Catholic days in the Capitol, that issue was not at all addressed. And of course, part of the problem was there was really very little going on in the legislature. It was pretty dismal regarding the issues of what we call creation and crisis. So when we look at the bills that we've been monitoring over our collective issues, and I get down here past gun violence, and then here it is creation and crisis. Now, there might have been about 8 or 9 bills, but these were the 4 bills that we focused on. The bottom 2, are probably going to go through. They're pretty good stuff, but the dastardly stuff is these 2 here. In fact, this newest one that we just learned of, Senate Bill 1624, is a god-awful going backward. And it's actually been approved by all committees on the House. It's been approved by all committees on the Senate, and it's up for final vote on the House and Senate. And of course, the legislature only has another week and a half to go. So these bills are going to pass. These bills are expunging references to climate change and greenhouse gases in the state's energy goals, replacing it with promoting natural gas, and imposing a ban on offshore wind energy generation. So this goes just hand in hand with last year's consistent action by DeSantis to refuse dollars from the federal government that can help facilitate mitigation. I mean, where there's billions, I think $11 billion that could go to Floridians to motivate them and give tax incentives to transition to renewable energy. Well, none of that is happening. So all this is to say that this is a pretty sad situation. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll make a few other comments here. The good news is we've cast our die, our lot or whatever, and we're out there. We've started to make relationships with legislators. Interestingly, of the 32 people that registered tonight, as a result of a letter that we sent to 42 Catholic legislators, Tom, we finally got the email addresses, and I have to share with you in another context how we got that. I mean, not their email addresses, their identity as Catholics. So you got 160 legislators, 120 in the House, 40 in the Senate. Of those 160 legislators, a whopping 42 are Catholic. So that is 40, 80, do the math. That's over 25%, far outcasting the general Catholic population in the state, which I think is about 12%. I may be wrong on that. Of the 42 Catholic legislators, 32 are registered Republican. But we had 2 that actually registered to join us tonight. One is the guy named Tom Keene, who's the newest elected legislator who took a vacated seat and flipped a Republican seat. He's a Democrat in the Orlando area. And he just has only been in town 2 months because the guy left his position, his predecessor, to take a position as president of one of the universities appointed by DeSantis. And the other one is the legislative aide of the Republican named in your neck of the woods, South Florida, Alice Garcia, if I say her name correctly. Her legislative aide is a woman named Daniela, get this, Rubio. I'm pretty sure it's Senator Rubio's daughter, who, if I did a little poking around, she's got a big interest in environmental issues. So wherever that goes. So in any case, we know how the system works a little bit. and we jockey to do what we may need to do. One of the things we have to keep in mind, Joe, is that there's an election coming up, and I know both my legislators are termed out, so I'm going to have a new representative and a new senator. This is a highly Republican county, and so I'm going to be going to the candidate meetings of the Republican candidates to ask them what is their stand on environmental issues, to see if we can, because we have to work with Republicans. This is the challenge. We've got to work with Republicans because they will continue to be the majority. Beyond that, if you poke around on the website, Joe knows that we have a page on the issue of creation crisis, and we've identified a number of groups that we can connect with, that we can collaborate with. So that is kind of like what we've done so far, and we've never done anything like that before in the name of Pax Christi, at least at that level. So I hope that's helpful and can somehow contribute to your action plan.
Thank you, John. We heard from Sandra about the message to remind us. We heard from Michael about COP28. We heard from John about how we can do movement in Florida. And now Sandra is going to put us in breakout groups for about 12 or so minutes, and then we'll come back to the larger group. Sandra? You're muted.
All right.
Sandra, you're muted.
I'm okay now, I think, right? Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to give us a prompt, and then I'll put it in the chat just so we can all refer to it. And then Michael's going to just press a button to put us in threes and groups. In light of what has been presented tonight, what are some ideas that come to you which could be implemented individually and in community to move forward care for our common home? Hopefully in Florida, but doesn't have to be that specific. What are some steps? What are some initiatives you could propose also to help with this issue and with getting more people on board? So I'm going to just put that into the chat so you can refer to it as you're speaking with each other. And hopefully, if we're in threes, everybody could appoint someone. Although Joe, it's not that large of a group, so maybe we don't need to appoint a spokesperson.
No. Why don't we just go into the breakout groups for 10 or 12 minutes, then come back as a group? How about that?
That's good. Okay, and I'll put that.
Okay, for the next say 10 to 12 minutes or so, we'd like to hear people would all unmute. You could all unmute as long as the dog's not barking in the background. If we could just share some of the things you heard in your dialogue in the triads to bring to the larger group. Anyone, just start.
Well, I think that one of the things we talked about was that we have to see this as a challenge to the individual. We can't expect other people to do it if we're not involved.
Okay. All right. Okay. Someone else?
I told you.
Well, Dave and I got a chance to chat and get to know each other, and he's doing some amazing things. He's on the transport committee down there, and he works at Barry University. And so we were focusing in on the fact, that one of the main purposes of the COP28 was about fossil fuels and trying to transition away from them. So Joe, I know you are just working intensely on that. And so we really think we really want to work with our legislators on that issue and move along on that. They talked about, you have to do this as a group in multilateralism. And so we're going to follow your lead on that.
Yeah, I'll mention if we have time at the end tonight, but tomorrow, Pax Christi is going to send everyone who participated 3 documents. One is an action plan that we've developed between now and next March in order to get the Florida legislature to take up a bill, a legislation that will allow them to endorse the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. The treaty is very simple. It's like what Michael said. Phase one, you're going to phase out of fossil fuels. And at COP28, the fact that they said transition away from fossil fuel disappointed people who wanted them to say, get rid of it. But actually, that was pretty big because in the last analysis, to get in that document text, all 195 nations have to agree. That meant all the oil producing countries had to agree. So now it's up to us to take that narrative and keep it going. You said that, now let's act on it. So phase away. The second is phase to renewables. Okay. And then the third is to do it in an equitable way, especially for those that people who are most affected, who cause least damage. So it's a very simple thing. And we have a legislation that I adapted, actually passed, we won't tell too many people, in the assembly in California, but other states have also ratified it. We have legislation. And then the third document is a link to Maryknoll's Office of Justice, Global Concerns, where all you need to do is put in your name, your address, and automatically to Governor DeSantis, your senator, your representative, a message goes in support of it. So you're going to get those three documents tomorrow. And any of you who are interested in working with us on it, you know, just even if it's just ideas you're going to give, we're going to start moving. Our first effort is to get a representative from Republican and Democrat. We have some leads to be willing to introduce the legislation starting in June when they start doing committee work, even though it won't happen until next spring. We need to be bipartisan and bicameral, Senate, House. We have some people already that I'll be approaching, and you know some people too. Then we're going to do the thing with the bishops. 4 bishops have already met with us. So we'll meet with all 7, see if they will help us in the parish. But we also have other ways to get the people in the parish. I mentioned in our little group yesterday, the Senate, Student Senate at Florida, University of Florida passed the Green New Deal. This is a major thing because that will go to all the other universities, student groups. Well, those students live in the 120 districts too. So we can connect with them. You know, we want to flood the districts so that when we're ready to unleash the link, you know, when the people to push it in, they'll get hundreds, maybe thousands of these things. And they'll say, oh my God, all these people think about this. So you'll be getting those 3 documents tomorrow. So, and then that'll hopefully be helpful. How about other people with ideas? We're trying to do Florida first and go out from there. So if you have some ideas that, Brian, you had a good one about us and our own network doing stuff.
I'm happy to jump in there, Joe,
Yes.
real quick, and simply to say, it's time that we would all stand up and be counted and do what we can do ourselves. Let's face it, many of us are able to do solar for our homes. Many of us are able to do something else. If we've done solar, let's tell people we've done solar. Let's spread the word. If we can bring a voice to, say, a parish council somewhere and say, excuse me, and why doesn't our parish have a solar roof? If we can do it anywhere, anyhow, if we can share the word anyhow, anyway, and model ourselves doing something first. It doesn't mean that we're perfect when we do it, because we got plenty more things we can be doing. But let's model this thing and move forward together.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea because each one of us is a network, right? Our family, our neighborhood, our friends, our organizations, we all have these networks. And I think Brian is saying, let's not be shy about mentioning climate when we go, when we talk, because people are not hearing it as much as they should from, say, the pulpit or from elsewhere. So let's use our own networks to get people engaged.
If we're not early adopters, who will be? Seriously.
Yeah. Got it. Someone else, please, would like to share what you heard in the group or just your own thoughts as we move forward about next steps? Just jump right in. Don't have to wait for me.
Joe, one idea, and it may be implicit in your action plan, is that it would behoove us to actually have a task committee that actually is going to be willing and have a presence to go to meetings in Tallahassee when that time comes to meet with committee meetings. So,
Yeah.
if you will, a legislative advocacy team at that, and there are people around here that have those developing skills. It's been kind of a new thing for me, but I know Anne is very accomplished, and some of us have learned a lot. So, and I know it's a million miles away from those of you in South Florida, but and there's a lot you can still do in your local districts.
Yeah.
But those committees meet. Those committees meet in Tallahassee, and I'm just saying that.
Let me put Tony on the spot. Tony, in your work, could you say a little about what your outreach is? Because you work for the Archdiocese, that might help us too.
Oh, well, thanks, Joe. Well, I've been here coming up on a year, and I'm the Archdiocesan coordinator for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. I'm really involved in grant reviews right now. But something more to the point is I'm also the Catholic Relief Service coordinator for the Archdiocese, and CRS put out an olive branch to all the dioceses, I think, and to us about forming high school kind of chapters. And so we were able to present that to the superintendent of Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Miami and the associate, and we met with them on Zoom, and my boss, the head of the CEO of Catholic Charities, and they bought into it. And so now CRS has an appointed a representative to the Archdiocese of Miami and to other dioceses he goes to in this area. And we have the superintendent of schools has appointed a high school teacher who's very interested in all this to be the representative for the high schools. And so he's beginning to connect us to all the various high schools and different teachers in that level. And so we're building a relationship between CRS and the high schools that way. And it's very promising. And I think it's going to go a long way eventually. So that's one thing I think that's very worth. And I would encourage that to be done as well. I know CRS is working with the colleges as well, Brian, and I'm just thinking that perhaps maybe we could get Newman centers and campus ministry centers in the colleges on board with all of this, and maybe we could even give presentations at some of the colleges. So that's another idea.
Tony, the high schools, that's very encouraging. We do have Michael's gotten, we have the names and addresses, emails of the 20 Catholic campus ministers in Florida. So that's not just for the 4 Catholic universities, but they serve all the universities. So we do have campus ministry, college, now with high school. The one thing about, not one thing, the Catholic Church, we all, even me, we criticize because it's so institutional. But the flip side of that is it is institutional. In other words, every parish has boundaries. So every acre of God's good earth, some parish has the responsibility for everything within its borders, not just the Catholics and not just people, everything within their borders. So let's use our structures, whether it's the high schools, the colleges, the parishes. Let's not just try to create something out of the air when we have structures that we're all part of. So I think, Tony, that's very helpful about the high schools and the institutions. And we know that people, once they hear that message of the Pope, when it really gets to them, like Sandra explained, it touches people's hearts. In other words, we're not making stuff up about the environment. We're not just making a fiction. I mean, people every day are dealing with this. Isaac mentioned about underdeveloped areas. I found a statistic that, here it is, 46% of communities of color in the United States are situated within 6 miles of a waste disposal plant. In other words, so we have stuff to do about the vulnerable people in our own country, that this is already a reality for them. So that's encouraging, Tony. Thank you. We have a few more minutes.
Joe, one other thing. I know that Catholic Charities in Washington, D.C., it has gone mostly solar. They have a large solar field in the city of DC.
Yes,
supplying
yes.
A lot of energy. It's really a model. So that's, speaking of the institution, there's the institution doing something really positive. And
Well,
hopefully.
Well, how about this one? The Super Bowl was the largest television event watched by people ever. The 5 hours of that broadcast were totally fueled by solar energy.
Huh.
The company and the CEO of the Raiders made a deal with the local solar energy in the community, and they provided all solar power for that entire event. So this stuff is happening. We just need to get our people, the information to do what Brian is saying, what you're saying, what we're all trying to do, and then the action will spin out. We have a couple more minutes, so if someone would like to share their own thought or reflection, Sandra? You're muted.
I'm not usually this, I'm pretty techno low, but not usually this techno low. But anyway, I shared in the group that I jumped into something I'd been thinking about this morning because I was preparing, the Pax Christi introduction and nonviolence. And so I was thinking about, what is nonviolent direct action, and what are the, some of the processes that Mahatma Gandhi used, and what Martin Luther King used. And actually, Joe, this was kind of bounced off from something that you had talked about in our emails, several weeks or months ago, about the salt, the march to the sea, and the salt. So I feel that somehow the power, we're talking about that we're rooted in nonviolence, so that we need to start wielding that power in ways where I had talked in the little group about globally, but really maybe even in Florida, is there something that we would like changed, as far as like even those initiatives or those bills that are going to pass, that might be too late for those, but can we harness enough people, even in the state of Florida, across all denominations, different groups, different sex groups, to come up with a day that we would do a nonviolent direct action to somehow interrupt the lives of the business as usual, to wake people up with that power, with the power of nonviolence.
Yeah, it's good, Sandra. Sandra's referring to Gandhi's the Salt March in India, where nonviolently he changed the country, but it took years to prepare for that. Same thing about Rosa Parks. People remember her on the seat, but she went to prayer groups and study groups for years before she didn't give up her seat. So there is preparation before action. The other good thing about Gandhi, another thing about Gandhi I read the other day is he said, the earth has enough resources for our needs, but not for our greed. So the idea is that some of us are consuming too much, and maybe the nonviolent approach to that is to disrupt that imbalance. So we'll take one more, because we need to end with a prayer that we have. Yes, John?
On the notion of the nonviolent actions and your reference to the Gandhi walk, it so happens that on Saturday I'm going to Selma to do a bucket list, and I'm going to do the walk across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the 59th anniversary, and I'm going to walk with my 2 Buddhist monk friends for 2 of the 4 days, replicating the walk from Selma to Montgomery. The notion of walks are a powerful action. Many years ago, there was a walk in the name of environmental concerns in the Everglades that went to Tallahassee. If you can imagine a walk of thousands of people, obviously they wouldn't be walking from Miami, but some kind of strategic walk could be replicated in cities across the state, but there would be a major walk, walking to Tallahassee, arriving X number of days. That's a reasonable, and there's logistics to do that, with 1,000 people showing up at front the Capitol Plaza saying, we want this non-proliferation treaty passed. I mean, that's the stuff that we could do, and that's right in the bailiwicks of Pax Christi, non-violent direct action stuff that's organizing.
It sounds like a pilgrimage.
Yes.
Tomorrow, you'll be getting those 3 documents. If you have interest in being more active, just let me know, because I'll be forming a task force, to guide the whole process. Mary Ann is going to help us with a concluding prayer. But I have another good quote that I like. It says, this is from Rosa Parks. She said, "Today's mighty oak is yesterday's nut that held its ground. So let's be nuts and hold our ground."
I like it. Good. I love
Mary
it.
Ann?
Love you, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, Mary Ann?
Sandy, do you want to have me just lead a prayer, or do you want us to do what
I
you
think-
originally?
In the interest of staying within time, if it's okay with you, Mary Ann, could you just lead us in a closing prayer?
Sure.
Okay.
So we give thanks. Loving, compassionate, creator, liberator, sustainer, for this time together, for the care for our earth that you have placed in our hearts, and for the care for those who are suffering on this planet that you've placed in our hearts. Give us the courage, give us the wisdom, and give us the energy to do what is ours to do. We pray all these things in all the holy names of God. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you all, and have a really peaceful and restful night. Thanks for participating. It means a lot. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
night.
Michael.